With the global population pushing 8 billion, the need for clean water and the technologies surrounding it have never been greater. Areas such as animal agriculture and fashion require a phenomenal amount of water, aside from the obvious drinking and cleaning requirements that we all have. Despite this, water is a fairly nascent investment area, with only a handful of European domiciled funds dedicated to the theme. I spoke with prominent investors to see how they're gaining exposure to water and the ways they're generating returns.
Thinking about businesses in the water industry is that water is used everywhere in the economy. So it's not just about water utilities and it's not just about agriculture. Everything that we see around us, water is used to make that and to maintain it, whether it's semiconductors or whether it's clothing or food and beverages. Water is used everywhere. There are ongoing challenges in water around increasing water scarcity, partly linked to climate change, increasing pollutants, things like microplastics, and companies who have solutions to those problems are in a good place. So if you've got a good business and you're in that area, then you're poised to do well.
Let me tell you a story about what it really means to me. My family, we're from Jamaica, and when my gran was really old, in her 90s, my dad was out there living with her, taking care of her. And out there in Jamaica, it's not like the glossy brochures. Life can be tough. You can have hurricanes that are tearing up infrastructure and landslips which wash away houses. Unlike Yorkshire, where I grew up, water can be pretty scarce. There can be environments where there's, it's real drought conditions. So, the river is an important part of life. The only problem with the river is that the water's really dirty, and because although people are drinking the water, they're also bathing in it and washing clothes in it, and then it flows downstream to the next village kind of thing. And my dad, he created the solution to this. He had a setup on the roof of the house to really purify the water. The only problem was, it looked great, but people started to get sick because his great creation was the perfect breeding ground for mosquito larvae and bacteria. So we had to solve that. And so we used a lot of filters and chemicals to sort it out. And by the end, we ended up with water which was clean for the family to drink, and not just the family, because we had these enormous vats full of the stuff, for some of the neighbours as well. And so there are real environments and there are places globally where water really is quite critical, and water's life really. And I think that as population grows, as climate change makes water stress even more of an issue, we'll see that demand for fresh water is going to increase.
While the need for clean water is unquestionable, is the sector really profitable? Funds dedicated to the theme have performed well, with assets rising to nearly 30 billion euros at the end of 2021, compared with 9.6 billion 5 years ago. Net inflows into water funds have also been on the up. Last year, investors pumped over 4 billion euros into the sector. That was more than double 2020's inflow figure.
It's a profitable sector, yes. Unlike some stories like in energy, it's mostly market forces. So it's all about having a product and a services in this environment. You have a few regulated companies, but it's less than 10% of the investable world. And even regulated companies which have a monopoly in this existence, they always have a return above their cost of capital. The more you invest, the more you create value. So yes, it's a very long-term profitable story, and you can pay for it. Prices are not excessive, and there's a lot of revolution happening.
It can be, and it's for us. So we don't invest in things like water rights or anything like that. We're about companies who are providing solutions to things like water scarcity, and then companies can make profits obviously by providing services that give value to the customers.
A lot of where the really attractive growth areas are, actually it's at the smaller end. So it's the companies that are providing the filters, companies which are cleaning water or with leak detection, technologies, really monitoring how water is being used, for example, to reduce wastage. Some of the ones which we're most excited about, Strix or Marlow or Stibtech, just to name a few. Stibtech is a Swedish company. It has a number of underlying businesses, but one of the things which it does within water is water treatment for municipalities. It also has a lot of the components which you need for treating water and purifying it, and it has a chemicals business. It's also active in restoring the pipes. You might not know, but here in London we waste 500 million litres of water every day. 500 million litres, which is just staggering. So there are companies which are coming in and trying to work out where the water is being lost, where the leakage is occurring, and trying to make sure that we're wasting a lot less of this crucial resource.
So a Swiss company called George Fisher. So it's an industrial business, and they have involved in a range of industries. So part of their business is actually in lightweight material for electric vehicles. But on the water side of things, they have a system of maintaining water temperature and water quality in high-rise buildings. So think of somewhere like a hospital, and that means that they can avoid Legionnaire's disease developing, which can make people in those buildings very, very ill. So sort of high technology monitoring of temperature, and then reporting it back centrally to make sure that water is safe and clean to use.
Could you explain some of the other companies that you're investing in that have been particularly profitable over the past year?
Companies such as Advanced Drainage in the United States, they're involved in two main areas. One is in stormwater management, and the other part of the business is in wastewater, so specifically in septic wastewater, so for areas that aren't connected to a sewer network. Really big demand in the US. A lot of parts of the South aren't sewered, and this also touches on the broader issue of environmental justice. So a lot of historically black communities in the South who for many decades have lived with really poor sanitation, and part of the solution to that is something that Advanced Drainage provides.
One of your top holdings is Veolia, and its share price has gone up about 40 to 50% over the past year. What's driven that share price increase?
Veolia is a French-based global utility, so it operates all around the world, and it's done particularly well really on the back of a takeover of its peer Suez. So Suez had a very similar business where it was a mix of water and waste management, and bringing those businesses together leads to an opportunity for a lot more efficiencies in that business, and that's a key reason why in the end of 2021 that the share price performed very, very strongly.
Strix, this little company based in the Isle of Man, and they are the global market leader in kettle control systems. Now, if you're anything like me, you struggle to get out of bed in the morning without a cup of tea. And one of the things which Strix does is they have their controls which are used more than 1 billion times globally every day. Actually, kettles are an extremely efficient way of heating water. They're about twice as efficient as the next best thing. So whether it's a microwave or putting it on the hob. In this country, we overboil our kettles. We put a lot more water in the kettle than we actually need. We're wasting a lot of energy in the whole kind of boiling process. And the technology which they have makes sure that you only boil the amount of water that you need. That's improving our energy efficiency. There are new countries which are only just at the beginning of their journey with the kettle. Places like India and China, but also the US. Only 1 in 5 households in the US has a kettle, amazingly. So they have some great growth markets that they're going into.
So Strix's share price has come down from quite a big high of 385p in September. Why has the share price dropped so much?
Yeah, so I think people have been concerned with Strix because a lot of kettles are produced in China, and there was concern in the public arena that, or among investors, that they could be hit by supply chain issues. And actually, there's a wonderful management team there who've been very good at managing their way through these through these systems. It's a business for which the demand is very robust and very stable, and over time, I think we'll definitely see the demand continue to be in place, and actually the orders come through, which can cause the recovery in the share price. So actually the share price fall that we've seen recently is a bit of an opportunity.
One of the challenges is that there's a relatively small pool of companies. So you think there are say 50 or 60,000 listed companies globally. In the water space, there are around 250, so it's quite a narrow area. But within that, there are some really, really high quality businesses.
When we invest in water and also in waste companies, it's looking at the world with a different angle. For many, many years, we've been looking at the world by geography or sectors. Here it's the thematic. So we invest in the entire value chain, which means remapping the entire world in terms of new development. For example, you can look at equipment, pump makers, valve makers, etc. They are smaller companies, so you need to put them in the right boxes. 80% of these companies, which are smaller, there are no mega cap of water or waste, are not covered by the big banks. So we need to do the effort to do the analysis. We know the companies themselves, we talk to them, we integrate them in something that makes sense, and then we benchmark them together.
Emerging economies have the most critical need for water technology, with many countries lacking the sewage systems present in the developed world. According to WHO and UNICEF, 771 million people don't have clean water close to home, and 1.7 billion people don't have a decent toilet of their own. But are fund managers seeing opportunities among emerging market companies, or are the risks too severe?
If you look at the investable world in water and waste together, it's around 60% exposure to the US. It's growing, it's $2.5 trillion in size of market cap. And emerging markets, 20 to 30% and growing. So emerging market is probably where we used to be 15 years ago. And waste is even probably 20, 30 years ago from where we are. So yes, a lot of opportunities. We see, for example, in China, you have China Everbright, which do treatment for waste to energy, but also Beijing Enterprise Water developing wastewater system, China Water Affairs looking at drinking water. You have a lot of small players growing in a very big push for cities to be more sustainable. But we also see that in emerging markets in Brazil through Sabesp in the water field, or some other new companies like Ambipar in the waste field.
And what's your allocation to emerging markets in your fund?
We have an allocation which is growing because some companies are listed in the US or in Europe, but with a bigger exposure. So the total exposure, we're close to probably 30% into emerging market. This is maturing, so these companies are not yet where we are, for example, in the developing world. Just to give an example, if you look at India, 70% of the waste in India is still dumped in the streets, where probably here 95% is collected. So you have a catch-up play, and that's why we can spot some companies who benefit from that very, very early on. And I think the market is still looking at the very big caps. So we have a tilt to the smaller players, which will grow. So it's all about doing the effort to be close to them, but also to help them to do their job sustainably. So we have an engagement program that we do when we talk to these companies.
It's not a big focus for us. We do have an investment in Sabesp, the Brazilian utility, which, around Sao Paulo, there are some climate change risks to manage there. We've got a large population of people, and rainfall is becoming sort of increasingly unreliable, if you like. But there are a lot of other risks associated with a name like Sabesp, not to mention sort of currency risk and governance risk. So it's not a large position for us.